Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to the Transit System Plan public meeting. We're going to delay start a couple minutes just to give folks an opportunity, some additional folks to join. So thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Andy Mock, and I'm the Senior Project Manager for the CATS Transit System Plan, or the TSP. And I'm pleased to welcome you to this important public meeting about the future of our transit system. Public transportation is the backbone of a thriving, connected, and sustainable community. It affects our daily lives, how we get to work, school, healthcare, and recreational activities. As Mecklenburg County continues to grow, we must ensure our transit system grows with it so we can meet the needs of all of our residents, businesses, and visitors. However, without additional funding, CATS does not have the ability to expand our transit system. Therefore, local leaders have asked the North Carolina State Legislature to consider giving Mecklenburg County the authority to put a local sales tax referendum on the ballot for new funding. This would be an additional 1-cent sales tax to invest in roads and transit. Today, we'll be discussing some key trade-offs for 4 alternatives transit scenarios, which aims to meet the needs of our growing community and fits within the parameters of the draft legislation currently under consideration. Thank you for being here today, and we encourage your ongoing engagement as we plan for the next generation of transit in Mecklenburg County. Let's get started. We're gonna start with a little bit of an overview on process today, on the transit system plan process, talk about the specific scenarios, and then the opportunities for ongoing engagement. Just a note about programming, we are going to do a questions and answers after the presentation. So I encourage you to put your questions in the chat. We'll have a number of panelists available, project staff, CATS leadership, available to answer any specific questions that you might have, as well as myself on the specific scenarios. So CATS has 2 big transit plans. It's the Better Bus / Envis My Ride, which really seeks to improve the bus frequency and the bus service throughout our community to kind of meet the needs of a growing community. And also the Rapid Transit 2030 Corridor System Plan, which seeks to implement major capital projects such as the Blue Line extension. Those include the Gold Line extensions, the Silver Line, the Red Line, and also the Blue Line extension. And so it's a really exciting time because those 2 plans have been out in the public discussion for many years, and sometimes decades, and there really hasn't been a viable path to implement. There hasn't been a budget, there hasn't been a schedule for any of those, so they're largely unfunded. So really the exciting thing is to think about the opportunity to develop a path forward to actually implement those 2 big plans that the community has embraced over the years. And really, this process is to develop that, given the potential funding that could come from the available referendum. Regarding the parameters outlined in the draft legislation, there are basically, this kind of lays out what that funding parameters would be. And as reported in the media, there's a 40% for roads. There's a 60% for transit of that percentage. 40%, no more than 40% could be spent on rail, and 20% is programmed for bus. So this is kind of the parameters in which we're trying to work within our 2 big plans to implement. Now, the challenge is the 2 big plans that we provided, that we've been pursuing, are greater, the cost of those is greater than is available within this funding. So what we're trying to do here is really right size our two big plans to fit within the available funding contemplated within the sales tax referendum. Regarding process, we've started this process in the fall, and we went through a number of Metropolitan Transit Commission meetings, talking about the process, talking about goals, talking about objectives, and we had a public process associated with it. It was largely virtual, largely social media, but we did have a number of in-person engagements, focused engagements. And we wrapped that up and completed that in January of this year. Then we also have the now we're in round two, which is really presenting some scenarios. We presented the scenarios to the Metropolitan Transit Commission in January, and now we were directed then to take those scenarios out to the public, and that's what we're here today, to kind of present those scenarios and get public feedback on that. After this process, there'll be a third round, which is really presenting whatever the recommended scenario would be, and that would go through a Metropolitan Transit Commission process as well. All the while, we're going to be doing public engagement, both large scale and small scale, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. The first round of engagement, we had a really strong response on our survey, almost 1,500 responses. That's a really strong response for us on the survey. And we had 10 stakeholder meeting events. We had a really strong social media campaign and push with over 100 plus shares and 20 posts, a lot of handouts, a lot of both virtual and paper outreach to communities, and over 1,400 comments were submitted. And the punchline of that engagement was a general concurrence on that more transit options are needed in Mecklenburg County. About 93% of participants agreed with that statement, and that about 95% agreed with our goals and objectives. Some of the comments that we received, as you can imagine, were really about improving existing service, reliability and maintenance, expanding services, making our customer experience much better. So that means, improving our bus stops, adding benches, as well as, implementing large capital projects. So we feel like we're on the right path given this feedback. So to get into this scenarios a little more specifically, we're gonna start with Better Bus, and I'm gonna hand it over to our Chief Planning Officer, Jason Lawrence, who can walk us through the scenarios.
Great, thank you, Andy. As Mr. Mock just detailed, the breakdown of the proposed 1 cent sales tax, 20% of that new revenue would go directly to bus, and we have for a number of years been working on updating our bus network to really with a customer-focused improvement strategy. And as you can see here, with that 20% in the first 5 years, we would increase nearly 50% on all our services, taking our top 15 routes to 15-minute frequency. Today, those 15 routes serve 60% of our existing ridership. So immediate improvements in those first 5 years. System-wide, we would improve all routes to 30 minutes or better frequency. And then we would fully implement the CATS Micro program across the county. We just launched that service into the communities around North Lake Mall, but also in Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson. And then we do have a plan to do that throughout the county. We have a number of priority bus corridors, so corridors like Central Avenue, South Tryon, Monroe Road, Freedom Drive, where we would implement signal priority and a more enhanced bus stop experience. We would expand our express route service. So what that would mean is expanding the hours of service in the peak, in the morning and the afternoon, but also include some midday service. And then as we look to increase growth in our paratransit services, that would be included in that growth as well. Bus stops, we heard in the public outreach just recently that, and we always often hear this, that bus stops are seen as a very critical piece of our infrastructure. And then in 10 years, with this new funding, we would improve 2,000 total stops that would include shelters, benches, and waiting pads. We would improve the age of our fleet through expansion, but also replacement. And then also improving the facilities for our own operators. And then also including improvements to our hubs in our uptown area. Next slide. So what does that mean? Those are the big numbers when it comes to routes and stops. But when you break it down to actual people, when you look at how, improving that 15-minute frequency, so within a quarter-mile walk, with those improvements, we'd have 250,000 more people, nearly tenfold increase versus what we have today with only 29,000 people with access to a 15-minute route. If you expand that to within a half-mile walk, an additional 200,000 people, for a total of 450,000 individuals would have access to high-frequency service. By expanding the 30-minute frequency and our microtransit service, 72% of Mecklenburg County will have access to at least 30-minute frequency within a quarter mile. But if you go to a half mile, that's nearly 90%. And then microtransit alone increases our transit service area by over 100 square miles. Next slide. And then as we look to persons of color and low-income individuals, there's significant increases across the board there. 91,000 more low-income individuals will have access to 15-minute frequency compared to 19,000 a day. Over 200,000 people of color will have access to 15-minute frequency compared to 40,000 a day. And then when it comes down to what transit does best is connecting people from their households to their jobs. And so with this increase in the Better Bus frequency and coverage, over 320,000 more jobs will be accessible within a half mile of the 15-minute frequency. And that's compared to just 127,000 today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Andy Mock to cover some of the rapid transit scenarios.
Thank you, Jason. As you can see, the Better Bus is really one of the signature parts of this plan. Very impactful, relatively immediate turnaround, but the rapid transit corridors are also immensely important to our overall capacity of the system, as well as providing great long-term service to our growing community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall transit corridor system plan as it exists today, and then get into the scenarios where things start to break up differences between specific scenarios based on the transit corridors that we have. So what you see in front of you is the transit corridor system plan that as adopted by our board, the Metropolitan Transit Commission. And I'll just briefly walk down through it. I think a lot of people are familiar with it, but I'll quickly go through it to make sure we all have a common understanding. Leading with the red line, which is a commuter rail line that goes from Mount Morn to Charlotte Gateway Station. It's the red dash line going from the lake down to Center City. We have the Silver Line East going from Charlotte Gateway Station to Indian Trail. The Silver Line West goes from Charlotte Gateway Station to the town of Belmont. The Gold Line extension east goes from Sunnyside to Eastland Community Center. The Gold Line West goes from French Street to Rosa Parks Place Transit Center. Those are extensions of the existing Gold Line, both on the east and the west side. And then, of course, the Blue Line extension, which picks up the Blue Line and takes it from I-45 where it currently terminates and then goes off to Ballantyne. So this is the transit corridor plan that has been adopted by our governing board. As we start to talk about scenarios and how we're going to right-size our plan based on the parameters from the proposed legislation, we are directed to follow within some principles or rules. You could imagine any number of ways we could have looked at the system plan based on funding limitations. But the MTC directed us to work within these rules or principles. So I'll just quickly go through them to make sure that everyone has a common understanding, because these are kind of the rules of the road as we're developing these scenarios. First is the red line. And the red line is first in all scenarios, and it's important project for the community. And it's first primarily because it was directed as part of the legislation that it must be built first before we can implement other projects. So other major rail projects. So it's an important project, and it's the same in all scenarios, and it's always first. Regarding the time frame, all the scenarios are constructed within 30 years. That's another requirement of the legislation. So we have to build all this stuff within 30 years. Regarding bus, we fully deliver the Better Bus program within the 20% sales tax revenue. So all the scenarios you're going to see, Better Bus is always the same, and we never sacrifice Better Bus for other projects. So that's a principal statement. Regarding the funding split, all the scenarios fit within the requirements of legislation, including the 40% rail cap. So that's another kind of principle that we're honoring the rail cap as defined within the legislation. And then we also, regarding the service commitment, this is very important, is that we will serve all the corridors outlined within the system plan. So some people have asked, well, why don't you cut this or do this? We are honoring the system plan as adopted by the MTC, and we're going to serve all corridors. Now, there's certain situations where we may serve those corridors differently. And that could be with either a change of mode to a less expensive mode, going from, say, light rail to bus rapid transit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, or we'll adjust the termini to make it shorter and therefore less expensive to implement to fit within the budget requirements. So talk about some of those key trade-offs when we talk about those two approaches, whether you're adjusting the termini or you're changing mode. We'll kind of talk about adjusting the termini. So, one of the first things we looked at is like, can we adjust the termini to some of our most expensive projects? And those are usually the light rail projects. They're very expensive, a lot of bridge structures, a lot of infrastructure required to make them work. So they're quite expensive. And by shortening them, you can save a significant amount of money to allow us to facilitate and enable us to fit within the funding requirements. It's also a common practice to build transit projects in phases like this and then set up for future extensions. I mean, the Blue Line was extended to the Blue Line extension, and now we're talking about extending it again, potentially to Valentine. So that's a pretty common, and you see that across the industry as setting up for expansions, service expansions. And then by doing that, it allows you to keep rail mode, to keep light rail, and to set yourself up for a future expansion in the future. And in the meantime, you can then program bus service to serve those communities until such time the funding is identified to do the expansion. And then the other one is to change the mode to bus rapid transit or some other mode. But what we've looked at is bus rapid transit, which is a premium service, which provides it's a flexible and convenient service. It's a bus service. Usually it's branded and specialized buses, and it's partially within dedicated guideway, dedicated lanes or segments, depending on how it works out. And it has a range of features that provide to enable it to be more frequent and more on time, and those can be having dedicated right-of-way, off-board fare collection, signal priority, and it usually has enhanced stations that are more comfortable for folks. And it can be tailored. Bus rapid transit can look different in different places. So if you go to one community, it can look one way, and it can look very different in another way. And it's really kind of flexible and allows you to kind of tailor itself to meet the needs of the community that it's within. And because the infrastructure requirements are less, it also is often much less expensive than light rail, but it is not inexpensive. But one thing to note about a BRT scenario is if a BRT scenario is selected, we need to take time to really to design and plan that much better and get public input on that. And the project definition is not 100% clear at this point what that BRT project could look like, and it could vary from the current thoughts of the currently locally preferred alternative, which is what the MTC calls the projects we're pursuing. On a note about light rail, most folks in Mecklenburg County are familiar with it because we spent the last 20 years building and implementing and designing the Blue Line. But it is a premium high-capacity rail service with enhanced stations. It has a fixed guideway and dedicated guideway. But it is also very reliable and has high capacity because of that. So that's a little bit of a trade-off there. So to kind of get into the specific scenarios themselves, these are the scenarios that we presented to the Metropolitan Transit Commission and have been discussed in our community for the last couple of weeks. Just to orient yourself to this slide, the scenarios we're talking about go from the top to the bottom. So scenario 1, 2, 3, 4. And then if you go from the left to right, these are the modes of the projects that are within those scenarios. As a note, the first 3 columns, the red line column, the better bus column, and the gold line column, all those are the same, independent of the scenarios, because they're not distinguishing. Those are not different in any scenario. In all scenarios, the red line is fully implemented. In all scenarios, the Better Bus is fully implemented. In all scenarios, the gold line is fully implemented. Where the distinctions come are within the silver line and the blue line, and those were the two light rail projects that were in the initial system plan, and those are the most expensive of the scenarios, and therefore those are the ones that are being the subject of the trade-offs. So to kind of orient yourself, or to way of thinking about this, is scenario one is the system plan as it exists today. It's just with a different implementation timing. So all the modes are the same. It's just that we are implementing as much light rail as possible within the funding limitations and setting ourselves up for future extensions on either side. So what that looks like for Silver Line West, that would be light rail from the airport to Bojangles Coliseum, with a future extension on the west to the I-45 and a future extension on the east to the town of Matthews. And then on the blue line, that would be a light rail to Pineville with an expansion to Ballantyne on the outside of it. So that is kind of the same system plan kind of general vision that we've had for the last 15 or 20 years, with just a different implementation strategy. And it's heavily rail oriented. The kind of mirror image to that is scenario 4, which is all bus rapid transit on the Silver Line and the Blue Line to Ballantyne. So that would be completely, but because we've changed the mode, we're able to implement to the full extent of the system plan as it exists today. Now, again, the project definition may be different ultimately when we get into engineering and further planning and engagement, but because it's a less expensive mode, it allows us to build further than if we choose light rail under scenario 1. Scenarios 2 and 3 are just kind of mixing and matching and variations of those themes of more rail versus more bus rapid transit. And so scenario 2 has light rail to the airport, and that would be airport to the Blue Line with an expansion to the west to I-45, and then bus rapid transit from Gateway Station to the town of Matthews, and then light rail from I-45 to Pineville with a future extension outside to Ballantyne. And then scenario 3 is bus rapid transit from I-45 to Matthews, and then light rail fully implemented from I-45 to Ballantyne. So all these scenarios also include the expansions of our light rail system, the Blue Line platforms to a through car, and would be complete within 30 years, and also would then fully deliver the Better Bus within 20%. So as far as the goals and objectives, which we looked at for round 1, of serving the customer and communities, advancing economic mobility, and fostering innovation. Our view of these is these are all meet those goals, and they are all vast improvements over the service that we have today. So we feel like that they all meet the goals. They will all provide good service to our community as it continues to grow. And just a quick table to talk about the comparison of the scenarios. Scenario 1 has a shorter rapid transit system in the meantime, but provides more rail, versus scenario 4 has a longer rapid transit system within the shorter term, but allows you to fully build out the rapid transit system from the MTC plan. And here's some quick stats. The bus service is a 50% increase. The commuter rail is 25 miles. Streetcar is 6 miles. Light rail varies. So scenario 1 has the most light rail at 12. Scenario 2 has 9. Scenario 3 has 5. And scenario 4 has none. While on the bus rapid transit side, scenario 1 has none, and then they vary up to 27 for scenario 4. And at a high level, it's like the percent of the rapid transit network built. Scenario 1 would allow us to build 74% of the rapid transit system from the system plan within this 30-year funding horizon, versus the scenario 4 would be the full 100% with the acknowledgement that it would be bus rapid transit instead of light rail. And then it builds up from there. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Natalie to talk about public engagement, and then we'll get into Q&A.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Andy. My name is Natalie Bouchard. I am the Community and Public Relations Specialist at CATS on this transit system plan project. I just want to tell you about a few ways that you can get involved. We love the questions that we're seeing in the live YouTube chat right now and really appreciate that. But there's a few other ways to get involved, and I will also link these in the YouTube chat so everyone can access them easily. So we have our project website, which is catstransitsystemplanupdate.com. There you will find lots of project resources, lots of information, contact information for the project team, and also the survey. So I will link those in the chat as well. We'll also have paper and hard copies of information at community centers, libraries, lots of other community centers in Mecklenburg County. And then we also have social media. We encourage you to follow us there. We'll be posting updates about engagement on those platforms. If you go to catstransitsystemplanupdate.com, you'll see the option to sign up for updates. That puts you on our email list, so you'll be alerted about any updates for the project, any events. And then, as you can see, we also have the email address and then a phone number that you can call to leave a voicemail for the project team. Can you go to the next slide, Andy? Thank you. So right now we're in the virtual public meeting, but there's a lot of upcoming community input opportunities, one in each corridor, east, north, south, west, and then in Uptown Charlotte. So this week, tomorrow, March 11th, in the East Corridor, we'll be at Matthews Town Hall, meeting there from 5:30 to 7:30. And then next week, we have two meetings, March 18th and 20th, in the North Corridor and the South Corridor. And then the following week is kind of our final week of in-person engagement in this formal setting, where we will be in Uptown midday on March 24th, and then on the West Corridor on March 25th in the evening. So besides those, we have been engaging stakeholders and neighborhoods and community groups about this project, and we'll continue to do so. And then in addition, we will be having pop-up meetings. So at transit centers, transit stops, to meet people where they are and get their input that way. But I mentioned the survey on the last slide. That is open until March 28th. You can scan the QR code if you're watching this on a screen and you have a mobile device with you, or I will also leave the link in the live chat. But those are some upcoming public engagement opportunities. We encourage you to come out. Most of the in-person meetings will be a presentation like this, and then there'll be the opportunity to input your comments, take the survey, chat with the project team. And we really appreciate everyone who has given us input thus far. And we are recording your comments and questions. So thank you so much. And I think it's time to go on to questions. Andy, you could go to the next slide. Great. Okay. So one of the first questions we got, how does microtransit work? What's the cost and what are the boundaries? I think JL could answer
Yes.
that.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So the CATS microservice that we launched back in February is same as our local bus fare. So it's $2.20 to book a trip within the zone. And the current zone is essentially is from the town of Davidson to the North Lake Mall area, and roughly is 1 to 2 miles on the other side of Interstate 77. How it works: an individual will use the CATS Pass app to book their trip, call for a ride, and then the on-demand vehicle will arrive at their location within 30 minutes and then drop them off within that same time frame. And as far as other zones, there are a number of zones throughout the county that will be implemented within the first 5 years of the Better Bus Plan with additional funding. There's up to 18 zones additionally throughout the county.
Thanks, JL. Our next question here Is it a permanent decision if BRT is chosen? Can BRT convert to LRT?
That's a great question. It's one we've heard a couple times. I think from a Silver Line and a Blue Line extension perspective, it is a permanent decision. And one of the reasons why that is because of the bridge structures and the infrastructure requirements are so very different between what a bus rapid transit vehicle would be and what a light rail vehicle would be. A light rail vehicle is quite heavy and has very rigid requirements, while bus rapid transit is a vehicle is much smaller, so the infrastructure requirements are quite different. And both the Blue Line extension to Ballantyne or Pineville and also the Silver Line in either direction has a lot of structures. And that is one of the primary areas that we're able to reduce the cost. So if you were to build the bridge structures to accommodate both light rail or BRT, it would be just about as expensive to build a BRT project as it is to build a light rail project. So there wouldn't be as much cost savings, and therefore there would be less of a benefit of actually changing the mode to BRT because of the structures requirements.
Thank you, Andy. Our next question, will the Gold Line be expanded toward Beatty's Ford / Sunset Road? Beatty's Ford, excuse me.
Yeah, it's with that, I pass it over to Jim Fatula, who can maybe talk a little bit more about the Gold Line extension.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Jim Fatula. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the Gold Line. And all the scenarios do include the locally preferred alternatives that have been adopted for the Gold Line, which includes an extension on the west side from French Street to the Rosa Parks Community Transit Center. And on the east side, an extension from the Sunnyside stop to the Eastland Community Transit Center.
Thank you so much. Next question, what type of transit improvements are planned for the Mountain Island / Oakdale / Coolwood areas?
Thank you, Natalie. I'll take that one. So in those parts of the county, so that's primarily around Brookshire Boulevard, Roswell's Ferry Road, and areas like that along those communities. Today we have routes that are 30 minutes during the day. We have a few 60-minute routes, and we have an express route that currently operates on Brookshire Boulevard. We would be improving all routes in that area to at least 30 minutes. Freedom Drive route, which does a loop nearby there, would expand to 15-minute frequency. And there is a microtransit zone that is nearby to those locations. So a mixture of local express and microtransit services in that general area.
Thanks so much. We have another Gold Line question. What will the service frequency be for the Gold Line once it's extended?
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, that's definitely something we're currently looking at improving. I can tell you we're working on an update to the 30% design of the Gold Line extensions right now. And our planning and design includes a 15-minute frequency.
Thank you. Next question, the Sprinter bus goes to the airport. Will there be a light rail that goes straight to the airport?
Thank you. The Silver Line West locally preferred alternative kind of follows the Wilkinson corridor out to the airport, and then has a stop which would connect to a people mover near the airport on the northern side of Wilkinson Boulevard. That's in coordination with the airport as they've done their long-term master planning. So that is the location of the airport stop as adopted by the MTC.
Thanks, Andy. Next question here. For all the scenarios, in what order would they be constructed?
Yeah, I think we don't 100% know the implementation strategy for all of them. I think we can say pretty confidently that because of the legislative requirements that the red line would be the first major capital project out of the gate, along with the Better Bus. So Better Bus, as Jason kind of presented, would be fully implemented. The operating will be fully implemented within 5 years, and capital or the bus stops will be within 10. We know that the red line is the first required capital project after that. After that, I think we get into further analysis required to really understand what makes sense from an implementation perspective, and that could tie into any number of strategies. So I think there's more analysis will be required for us to fully get our arms around that decision. It's a very big one.
Next question, and this one I think Kelly can answer. I'm not aware of any requirements either in legislation or principle that mandate the streetcar plan. Is there a justification for why the Gold Line extensions are seemingly non-negotiable?
Great, thank you, Natalie. This is Kelly Goforth, the Chief Development Officer for CATS, and thank you for that question. The way that we approach the development of the scenarios is with some key principles, which Andy went through as part of the presentation. And one of those key principles in working with the MTC was to serve all corridors. So we looked at the development of the scenarios with that in mind. So we looked at whether we could change the terminus or shorten the lines or change the mode and develop financially constrained scenarios. So that's the approach that we took with the development of the scenarios. So we did not eliminate any of the corridors as part of that process.
Thank you so much, Kelly. The next question, are more cars going to be added to the streetcars?
Well, when we implement the future extensions, more vehicles will absolutely be required to operate an extended service. I think if the question, are we buying more vehicles for the service today? I mean, I would defer to Jim, but I don't believe that's part of the current plan outside of the extensions, which will absolutely require additional vehicles.
Thanks, Andy. That's correct. The extensions would require more vehicles, but currently there's no plans to add additional vehicles to the alignment that we have operating.
Thank you both. We have another question. Is there a way to give the Gold Line a dedicated lane or intersection priority, at least within Uptown, to increase its speed and reliability for commuters?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's something that we've been taking a look at, is where we can potentially give the streetcar priority. I don't think Uptown is one of the areas, and there's a lot of factors that go into that with signal timing and other things with CDOT, but it's definitely something that we're looking into for the extensions, and really putting a heavy focus on how we can increase the runtime and reliability for folks. So that's definitely something we're looking at.
Thank you. Next question here. After new funding, will the Blue Line run at 8-minute frequencies again?
Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie. I'll try to take a stab at that one. So when we talk about improving service frequency for existing services, we would look, including the Better Bus, we would look to improve the frequency of the Blue Line as well with additional funding. I think that the first step will be in that kind of 10-minute range versus the 8-minute, but that'll largely be dependent upon the amount of vehicles and operators we have available, but we will look to improve frequency on the Blue Line with new funding.
Thank you so much. Next question. will the 97, 98, and 99 be going away?
So with the implementation of the CATS microservice, it was always intended that we would be phasing out the routes 97, 98, and 99 and 290. We conducted public outreach for that last fall. And in this calendar year, we will be working with the Metropolitan Transit Commission and the community at large to phase out those services, and as we fully ramp up the CATS microservice.
Thanks, JL. Another microtransit question. Is there permanent funding for the microtransit program?
Sure. So with the new funding scenario, with that 20% of a proposed new 1 cent sales tax, that would go dedicated to bus operational funding, which would include microtransit.
Thank you so much. And we have a better bus question as well coming up next. So does Better Bus include the improvement or an even restoration of pre-pandemic levels, the CATS Express / Metro Rapid buses that serve the suburbs like Cornelius, Huntersville?
Sure. So the way that I think that we are thinking about this now, I mean, a lot has changed in the past 5 years with how travel patterns have occurred. People operate and work a little bit differently. So we are exceeding the service levels within those 5 years to our bus network. It's not necessarily putting the exact same thing back in place, but we will be far exceeding our bus hours in those 5 years, which would include improved frequencies to the I-77 corridor, the Metro Rapid services. There would be expanded hours in the morning and afternoon, but also we would have midday service, and we're exploring opportunities for weekend service as well.
Thank you so much. Next question here. This is our red line question. Has Camp North End been incorporated into the preferred alternative of the red line? Or is the first stop still Derrida?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, this is.
Oh, go ahead, Brian. I didn't know you were going to jump on.
Sorry, this is Brian Nadolny, the project manager for the Red Line, and the Camp North End station is not currently in the locally preferred alternative, but throughout our design process, we've heard a lot of support for that station. So we've been analyzing that, and it looks like that's a station that we would recommend to the MTC, but that would have to be adopted. But definitely have a lot of strong support for that.
Thank you so much, Brian. Okay, let's see here. The question is there an overall analysis of distance to nearest transportation stops for each neighborhood, i.e. distance to nearest bus stop, distance to nearest park and ride? Are these walkable for residents?
So Natalie, I can get to some of that question. The statistics that we shared with you showing the increase in population, that was generated by using that kind of analysis spatially to determine how many people are within bus stops, park and rides as well. And we will, of course, coordinate with our partners across the city of Charlotte and all the towns to incorporate bus stop improvements as they work to improve sidewalk and roadways.
Thanks so much. Let's see. How is CATS going to ensure that all passengers pay their fare to enter the system?
Well, we do have fare monitoring on the system, especially on the blue line. We do have fare officer police. This continues to be a area of focus for us to try to improve the fare enforcement overall. We do have the fares collected on board buses, so that's a very clear requirement. But we do have fare enforcement. That will be continue to be a area of focus for us as we move forward.
Thank you, Andy. Another question, has CATS evaluated commuter rail options for Matthews or in other communities similar to Red Line service?
Right. Yeah, we've heard that requests from several folks from the community. We have not evaluated any more. We have not evaluated that any deeper than providing some thoughts. I think that if that's something that the community wants us to look at. I think that would have to be a future conversation about what service that would look, what would that look like, and can we actually physically do that service? I think that's would be a complete unknown for us at this point. So it would be a brand new kind of idea and evaluation that we have not looked at in the past.
Thank you, Andy. Another question about red line for Brian. Since all scenarios have the red line first and all these items must be completed within 30 years, what is the time of completion for the red line? Open for actual service, not just design.
Right. So if the sales tax is passed this year, we'll go into 30% design, and then we'll be entering the federal process. So there's a lot of factors that take place, but it looks like it would be somewhere between 8 to 10 years for that to be implemented. And so we should note that the other projects can go into design and start the implementation while the red line is being built. Just the red line has to be implemented first.
Thank you, Brian. Next question here, when will we learn more about Charlotte Gateway Station Phase 2 constructions?
I'll take that one, Natalie. This is Kelly Goforth. Thank you for the question, the interest in the Charlotte Gateway Station project. For those that don't know, the Charlotte Gateway Station project is the proposed multimodal station in downtown Charlotte, the relocation of the Amtrak station into Center City, also where we would expand and have a bus facility, intercity bus services, streetcar, and the future Silver Line would all connect at this future Charlotte Gateway Station project. We've been working with a private developer to have a potential mixed-use development as part of Phase 2, and we are continuing to work with the developer to try to finalize that the scope of that project and the financing plan for the Charlotte Gateway Station project. So I hope to share more of that in the coming year as we still are committed to bringing that project forward.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Just a quick reminder, time check here. We have about 10 or 11 more minutes for questions, so please do put those in the live chat on YouTube if you have them. If for any reason you have questions after this virtual meeting, we're also available by email. That's tsp@publicinput.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 704-461-4441. The project code is 10887. And there's lots of ways to reach us, and we'd love to see you at our in-person public meetings as well. Let's get back to some questions here. Commuter lines to Kannapolis and Gastonia are also great options. When are those going to be considered?
So Andy, I may just take that just real briefly. We worked with some of our regional partners and the state on a regional mobility initiative called Connect Beyond. And in that, we identified, plans that had already been put in place for future considerations for intercity services, such as that you mentioned to Gastonia and Kannapolis, and that is in the state's rail plan. And then, of course, we will coordinate with those plans as they move forward. Currently, for this effort, we're focusing on Mecklenburg County.
Thank you so much. Let's see, will there be increased security at the light rail stations / on trains, and are there plans to ensure everyone has a ticket?
Thanks, Natalie. This is Kelly Goforth. I'll try to address that one. I did want to share, I know we had an earlier question about fare enforcement as well. that we do have underway a fair policy study. And one of the aspects that we're looking at as part of that is fair enforcement and the issue of fare evasion. And so there are some options that we're looking at, like fare validation, either on the stations or on the vehicles. And so that is one of the measures, in addition to our safety and security personnel, that can assist with fare enforcement.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Next question. Charlotte Airport recently said their master plan allows for a people mover, but it is not committed in the plan and could allow a direct rail connection. Has CATS consulted about that possibility?
Yeah, well, we've been working with the airport for years, decades. So we're aware of the people mover plan. We've got, and it's our understanding that if and when this Silver Line will be implemented to the airport area, that the people mover would be a part of the airport's plan to make that connection. So we're aware of the general ideas for some locations for where they intend that people mover to be, and also the connection to the Silver Line West in a general way. We do not have specific details for how those connections would occur at the moment, but if and when the Silver Line West moves forward, we would want to engage with some much more detailed coordination and communication with the airport about how and when those accommodations could be made for the Silver Line West and the people mover, so that that seamless connection can be made.
Thank you, Andy. Let's see. Are there any plans to extend Blue Line to PNC?
Not that I'm aware of. I worked on the Blue Line extension many years ago, and we did look at some alternatives. As part of the current system plan, I'm not aware of that being in the longer range plan. It certainly could be something that could be evaluated, and we did evaluate that as part of Blue Line expansion planning, 15 years ago. So it could be something that we could look at as a separate planning study, but is not currently part of the plan as it exists today.
Thank you, Andy. Any plans to expand services, hours of operation for STS?
Thank you, Natalie. So, our STS service, our paratransit service, is tied very closely to our fixed route service, so local bus routes. So as we expand either the coverage of those routes, extending, or we expand the hours, the paratransit STS service will work with that in sync. So as we expand the local bus network, the paratransit service will expand in kind.
Thank you, JL. I just want to remind everyone we have about 5 minutes left for questions. And if for any reason you still have questions or comments after this meeting, I encourage you to reach out to our project team, tsp@publicinput.com. There's also the project voicemail number, which is 704-461-4441, project code 10887. And again, all that information is also in the chat, so you don't have to memorize it while I say it. But let's see if we have any more questions in the chat to answer. This question, will there be a train at Charlotte Motor Speedway?
Yeah, I think that's kind of part and parcel of the PNC. There was a period of time, 15/20 years ago, where there was an initiative to look at an extension of the Blue Line to the Charlotte Motor Speedway. That is not currently part of the plan as it exists today, but a future planning effort could evaluate that. but that is not part of the plan as it exists today. But there are certainly some significant uses, special event uses in that area, including PNC and Charlotte Motor Speedway, which would be very interesting to attempt to serve.
Thanks, Andy. All right. Let's see here. With all the new housing happening around Old Pineville near Yancey Road, are there plans to add a stop near businesses like Raleigh, etc.?
There's a South End station, not exactly in that same specific area. There's a new station planned to be built just south of Tremont, but there is not any new station planned elsewhere on the Blue Line. No other infill stations. Certainly, that's something that could be evaluated, but that is not part of the current plan.
Thank you, Andy. Let's see here. Any news on the CTC redevelopment? When will renovations start at the CTC?
Thanks, Natalie. This is Kelly Goforth. We have been working on an evaluation of the conditions at the CTC for the past several months. We know that improvements are needed, both for our customers as well as our employees that use the Charlotte Transportation Center. So we anticipate that we'll have some recommendations coming to the Metropolitan Transit Commission over the next couple of months so that we can begin some of those immediate improvements that are needed at the CTC. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Folks, we have about 1 more minute until we're going to end this virtual meeting. We really appreciate all of the comments and questions. They have all been recorded. We appreciate your input and would just encourage you once again, there's lots of places where we're seeking your feedback. So let's see if we have time for about 1 more question. Let's see here. Don't know that I'm seeing any more. One is saying, could we get service to the Concord Mill Mall?
I'll just take that. No, Andy answered the question regarding train service, but I will just add, we do have a bus route that connects to the Concord Mills Mall currently today. It connects from the J.W. Clay Boulevard station, and we would plan to keep that service. And we also work with our partner, Ryder Transit in neighboring Cabarrus County. They serve there, but they also come to our J.W. Clay station, and we intend to maintain that service to the mall.
Thank you, JL. And thank you everyone again for your participation. And once again, you can find that contact information in the chat and also the link to the survey. Your input is very important to us to shape the future of transit.